Hi guys, it's Sandy with Sandy Cogdale Designs, and today I have a final video for 2025. I was working on this card over the Christmas holiday, and I thought it would be neat to kind of do a process video showing how I created the background for this particular card. This was created using Hello Bluebird's new release. It's called Post Office Square Scene, and I really like it because it cuts out the different elements, if you want to call them that, on the background. So it gives you all kinds of flexibility as far as cardstock that you want to use, if you want to do shading, if you want to do stenciling. It just really helps in that creative process. This particular video is not going to have any coloring of the little friends. I just did that, just to keep the video somewhat short. Anyway, go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. You can follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdale Designs or on my blog, www.sandycogdaledesigns.com. All right, let's get started. I'm going to start with the actual post office building, and I have cut that from a kind of a scrap piece of wood grain cardstock. I'm going to use a little bit of ground Espresso Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to hit all of those edges to kind of give it a little bit more texture, a little bit more highlight. I am going to go out and around that door, so I'll just put a little piece of scrap in between that door and the background and kind of darken up that door a little bit. And then I just kind of hit all of the top high edges of that cardstock just to kind of enhance that wood grain that's already put into the cardstock. I wanted to create a little cobblestone walkway that goes up to the door of my post office. So I'm going to take a piece of white cardstock and I'm going to just apply a little bit of, it's called Eclipse masking tape, I believe, to a piece of white cardstock. I'll go ahead and trim that off. And then I'm going to run that through my die cutter, cutting out the bottom part of that little scene where the snow is at the very bottom of the post office. Now that I have that piece cut out, I'm going to line up the bottom of my post office in that opening that's been cut out, and I'm going to just kind of hand draw in where I want my little cobblestone path to be. I'm going to use my scissors to cut along those lines that I've drawn. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually creating a mask for the snow parts that are going to be alongside of that cobblestone sidewalk that I'm getting ready to ink in. I've used the die to cut another piece of white cardstock. This is actually going to be the snow that's at the bottom of my scene. I'm going to take the two pieces that I have that have been masked off, and I'm going to apply them to both sides of that snow piece. Now that I've got that masked, I can go ahead and start inking in my little pathway. So I'm going to start with some Lost Shadow Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just going to put a very light coat of gray down on that open area. And then I'm going to use a stencil to go ahead and place in my little cobblestone design. The stencil I'm using is a newer one from Fawn. It's called Cobblestone Stencil, and I'm going to use Hickory Smoke along with that stencil to go ahead and get that placed in there. Once my ink is dry, I will go ahead and remove those two pieces of masking. I will probably save those along in my package so that I can use them for another card. I think that the little cobblestone is just a really nice touch for the little post office. Now I'm going to add some shading to the snow that's around my little pathway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the masking that I cut off when I was doing the side masks. and I'm going to cover up my cobblestone sidewalk. Then I'm going to use a little bit of Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink and hit those areas down at the base where the little post office is and around the edges. And then I'm also going to follow that up with a little bit of shaded lilac. In the video, it kind of looks like my color is a little bit muddy, but they actually turn out pretty nice. It's just nice to give that snow a little bit of shading and not use, you know, your regular grays. Now I'm going to start putting my background together. I've cut a piece of cardstock 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. I also have a little bit of scrap from all the cutting I did of the different cardstocks that I'm just going to kind of lay on top of that to help me line up where I want to place my snow at the bottom and where I want to place my little post office. Once I have the snow placed actually where it needs to be, it's pretty easy to start placing in the rest of the pieces because they all just fit together like a little puzzle. So I'll get my snow put in first, and then I will glue in my little post office, and then we'll start working on the little piece of sky. For the little piece of sky, I've used just some cardstock, the same cardstock that I used for the snow. And I inked some tumbled glass at the bottom of it, and then I went at the top of it and used a little bit of blueprint sketch just to give that sky just a little bit more of a glow and kind of a wintry feel. Once I have that inked, I'll go ahead and glue that onto my little background piece here, and we will move on. I found that the easiest way to create the lettering on the post office sign was to use a piece of white cardstock that I had adhered some double-sided adhesive to the back. I'll go ahead and run the sign through my die cut machine, pull it out, and then I'm going to use my little pokey tool, and I'm going to start picking out the individual letters. Now I want to make sure that I keep like the center of the P, and then there's a couple of O's that I want to keep the center of, because once I pick out that letter, I'm going to need to put the center back in on the sign. Hopefully that makes just the slightest bit of sense to you. Once I have those letters picked out, I will remove the backing of the adhesive tape, and I will take that die and lay it on top of the other piece that the die cuts out for the background of the letters. So as you can see, the red is the front part of the sign, and by using that second piece, you're actually creating the letters without having to line up all those little teeny little pieces. Once I get that done, I'll kind of trim it up because I didn't get it exact, and then I will add in the center of the P and the center of the O's. And then I'm also going to take just a little bit of Copic ink and just kind of go around those edges to kind of dull down that white, and then to also give it a little bit of dimension. For the little roof above the door and the trim around the door, I've cut that out of a dark green cardstock. I'm going to take one of my Copic markers, one that's a little bit darker in color, and just kind of add on a little bit of dimension. So I'm just going to flick some little strokes up and then maybe go around the edges just to kind of soften up that die cut piece. I'm going to go ahead and just use some liquid glue to apply the frame around the outside edge of my scene, my little roof, the trim around the door, and the post office sign. And then all we have to do is finish up with those little windows. I wanted to add a little something to the left side of that post office, so I decided to use a die from the new Hello Bluebird tree lot die set. And I cut out a tree using green cardstock, and then I just went in with one of my Copic markers and just kind of flicked some color on there to kind of give the impression or the illusion of some little pine branches. I'll also use a dark brown marker just to color in the trunk of that tree. For my windows, I just glued in the little white pieces of cardstock that the die cut. And then I'm just going to go in with a C1 Copic marker and just kind of draw in some, I guess you'd call it a little bit of window glare on each one of those windows. Okay. So rather than put that little strip of snow that comes with the die on the top of that little roof piece, I decided I wanted to add a few little snow drifts to my scene. So I went ahead and I used that piece, and then I just kind of used a pencil and some scraps of the other pieces that had been cut out and just kind of drew where I would want my little snow drifts to begin and end. So I'm going to use the outside of that post office for one piece of the snow that's going underneath the tree, and then I'll use a scrap that was from the cobblestone area to kind of give me an idea of where I want to cut out my other piece of snowdrift. I added just a light dusting of Lost Shadow Gray to the top of those snowdrifts, and then I'll just go ahead and glue them down into my scene. I'm also going to leave the top edge of that snowdrift on the bottom right-hand corner open because at this point I'm not sure if I want to tuck something behind it or put something on top of it. That I'll just leave it open. That way it's not a problem. It's just not a problem. Okay, like I said at the beginning of this video, I did not record myself coloring any of these images. So I will go ahead and just read off the Copic colors that I used. So for my bunny, I used E40, E41, and E42. The little hedgehog is E50, E53, E34, E25, and E27. The mouse is E30, E31, E33, and E37. My squirrel is YR30, YR23, YR24, and YR27. For the greens, for like the little jackets and the scarves, I used G21, YG63, and G94. My reds are R14, R27, and R39. My blues are B21, B23, and B45. Yellows are Y00, Y13, and Y18. My inner ears and cheeks are R00, R20, R21, and my little packages are E41, E43, and E44. Now I like to give a little bit of dimension to my cards, so I did pop up the bunny, the squirrel, and the mouse, and I even popped up the little hedgehog. Now I went back and forth on him because I wanted him to be coming out of the door, so I wasn't going to pop him up, but then I thought it helped to kind of open that door a little bit if I did pop him up. So I did wind up popping him up with some little foam squares. I also want to note that I like to add the liquid adhesive or the liquid glue to my little foam squares. Some people would say I have trust issues. I do have problems with stuff sticking to the foam tape and the tape runners. So I am a big wet glue girl. So I try to use that on, or I use that on mostly everything. So I do go ahead and add just a drop of glue to those little foam pieces. The sentiment on this particular card also comes from the stamp set. And I don't know if I mentioned what the stamp set was, but it's the new Hello Bluebird Merry Mail stamp set, which is just adorable. And it really could be used for any type of winter scene. It's not necessarily a Christmas stamp set, at least I don't think so. But back to the sentiment. I did use the sentiment from that stamp set, which does say Merry Christmas on it. And I just stamped that out with some VersaFine ink. That pretty much does it for my card. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending a little bit of time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to be notified of future videos. I'm going to try to do a little bit more in 2026, but we'll see. Anyway, you can also follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdell Designs. And on my website, which is, or my blog, which is www.sandycogdelldesigns.com. Thanks again, and I hope you have just a happy and joyous new year. Bye-bye.